Where were we? Right. From Patrick, can you explain the demarcation problem and explain why falsifiability either is or is not a sufficient criterion for demarcation? If it is not sufficient, then what else is needed? Thank you in advance and thank you for all of your work. My answer is it is sufficient. Every criterion we have for testimony other than parsimony is also a criterion for falsifiability, with parsimony merely telling us how to select among multiple competing hypotheses that have survived falsification. Probably state that demarcation problem is what separates science from non-science.
Yes, though the problem is Popper's, and I think David Deutsch, and I can't remember which book it is he wrote, covers this, is that falsification is insufficient to say that something is falsifiable. It's that something it's the survival from falsification then it's parsimonious competition with the surviving theories that determine its potential for being non-false. Because this is the problem: is you study truth tables as a kid, right? I mean, they generally teach this. Well, they don't teach computer science, but they teach it as a kid. Truth tables, true, false, true, false. The problem is that they're treated equally, and they're not. Truth is always contingent, and falsehood isn't. Like if you demonstrate something's false, it's got a higher certainty than truth. So the hierarchy of certainty is incomprehensible, then undecidable, then possibly true, then certainly false. And so false is a higher standard than truth. And so what we're trying to do is say, if we've exhaustively falsified something in every dimension possible by man, then its likelihood to be not false, in other words, a truth candidate, is high. The end result that we're adding to this is we do know the first principles of the universe at the level of human action. We don't know the first principles of the universe in the sense that, it looks like modified Newtonian gravity is correct instead of Einstein gravity, right? That looks like it's correct. We don't know, we may never know how the universe actually started and where it's going, or if we're like within a broader context, there are universes that bubble next to each other and iterate, or it's a single universe that pulses like a heart every gazillion years, right? So we may never actually know that, but at the scale of human action behavior, we do know the first principles of the universe. In other words, we know from pressure and entropy and negative entropy, or dissipation and mass. We know how the universe operates, and so what you've seen us do is catalog the first principles at every scale of the universe, at every scale of evolutionary computation. And so what we've done is we've listed those 15 to 23 rules, depending on how you want to count them. And then we've discussed all the variations underneath them. And all those variations are still by that same ternary logic. So we say, okay, well, the purpose of science then is to discover those first principles which are irreducible. And once we have those, now we have a great tool that we didn't have when Popper and the other people were talking. Now we have to say, okay, we have a theory or a hypothesis. It has to both survive falsification and be constructible. If it can survive falsification and be constructible, right, then it's very hard to say it isn't true at the level of precision we're asking the question. Right? There may be greater precision because there may be second order effects that emerge, just like all of evolutionary computation produces second order effects that emerge, right? Our brains being the great example, and the current kerfuffle in AI, which is like, okay, we use the same model as the human brain, and now we have no effing idea what's going on in there. Well, I keep telling people the brain operates very simply. I know, Moritz, I'll get you. The brain operates very simply, but trying to trace what it's actually doing is at a level of complexity. It's like trying to say, well, why do we have to use a probabilistic measure of the quantum background? Right? Why does quantum mechanics have, well, because you can never know the effing state of anything all at once in that fucking complexity. And even if you could, you couldn't do anything with it because there's too many external factors interacting with it. It's like I try to tell you, we've created neurons, but we haven't created dendrites. And so the brain does most of its computation down at the dendritic level. The neuron is a relay. Well, of course, these computers are faster than the humans because first they're working at the speed of light instead of the rate of electrochemical transduction. But I mean, they're also simpler. They're also working at the categorical level rather than the micro level. Anyway, did I make sense there? And maybe Moritz, you want to riff off whatever you're going to say there?
Yes, I think the current AI suite of tools that have come online that people have gained experiential understanding of help illustrate that a little bit. We have the LLMs now, which are basically text generators, and they have a certain training that produced them, which allows them to generate this text in a generally human readable form and human usable form. And so then we have, on the other hand, though, the old school of AI, which is GoFi, like good old effing AI, which is more logic reasoning and basically construction of logical rules that you can use to eliminate or just discern things. And then I see the benefit of they're coming together very starkly in the use of Wolfram Alpha language or Wolfram Alpha, the plugin, with regular ChatGPT, where ChatGPT provides basically an interface to the powerful computational capacities that Wolfram provides you. But those powerful computational capacities, we don't think about the computational capacities there in the same way that it itself operates. We continuously do it through language, or the vast majority of us in any meaningful way. So that's, I think, provides a good sort of example of this kind of generator function, which is how you come up with a theory, a hypothesis, you investigate that to an extent, or you attempt to falsify it in advance of actually doing empirical things, so that you spend your energy wisely. And this is another thing that is often not really talked about in the scientific context. What we're attempting to do in science, we're attempting to construct investable hypotheses, not just hypotheses.
There you go. Thank you. That's really right. That's correct.
Right. And so lots of the time when people come up with something, they have come up with it very cheaply. And what we're attempting to do is very cheaply also discern whether this is something we should spend more effort discerning at a deeper level or not. And this is why we apply these tests of falsifiability and of other forms of first principles, is to not spend all of our resources on a thing that we might be able to eliminate much earlier in the process.
Great. So this just reminds me is technically I'm from the Popperian Hayekian tradition, and so one of the things I criticize, I explain about Popper is that he didn't solve what we did, which is falsification and constructivism. Although both theories existed at the same time, they were both theories extant in the intuitionalist movement and in the Popperian movement. They both existed, but they never came together. It's actually awareness of this in Popper's criticism of it is what led to the attempt to reform psychology, which hasn't propagated into sociology. So one of the other mistakes Popper made, it's not incorrect, I don't think he made any mistakes, he just was advancing the theory as much as he could, was that he said that there was no means of decidability, but it turns out that Moritz just explained what that decidability is that you can decide in which theory to invest in by what's economically possible to invest in. And it turns out that there's just this, because remember, Popper did no research before making that statement. He just did it logically, right? That statement's from logical understanding, not from doing research. It just turns out that since the universe is is extremely economically frugal in its investigations. That taking the most economically rewarding path turns out to be the best path to take. In other words, there's a high correlation between those two. It's Bayesian, but it's not perfect, but it's close.
And this also explains. Go ahead.
I very well read on Popper, but as far as I know, other than this work on falsification, our work falsifies everything Popper ever said.
Yeah, I have a problem with that. You're right. Yes, you're always right. But you're right in the sense that I don't know if I would have gotten here without him. Like I wouldn't
I'm not saying that work on falsification isn't important.
Right.
Everything else is wrong.
I don't want to get the Popperian community all up in arms when I consider myself in that. But it's like I wouldn't have done what I've done without Hayek. Right. I wouldn't have done what I did without Turing. Right. And Chomsky's restatement of Turing and grammar. Right. So, you have these people that come before you and you're like, okay, well, it's like I look at Popper and then I look at Tarski. And I'm like, well, it's not exactly right. In fact, the whole analytic movement was a crash and burn, right? For these reasons. But was it better than the continental movement's crash and burn? I mean, they're still pumping out fantasy moral literature, right? In droves. And so at least we crash and burn figuring out that, wait a minute, there's no closure to logic. Just like there's no closure to language, there's no closure to logic. Why? Because what's the difference between language and logic? Just the categories we use. There's nothing else. We use operational language, which is operational logic, which is just operational language, which unifies logic and language. And empiricism, excuse me, logic, language, and empiricism. Anyway.
So I just want to put a bow on that in the sense of wayfinding. I think that is a useful language to use, or useful term. What we're attempting to do is we're always attempting to wayfind our way to more opportunity, more possible energetic access. And so scientific process is part of that general human or life enterprise of finding opportunity, of generating more energy or more access to energy. And so when we're going down the path of investigating some hypothesis, we're attempting to ascertain whether it's worth us spending our resources to see whether this can lead to new access or new energy.
Okay.
Also, I just want to add, I think there's a difference between falsifying the previous generations that you build off of versus disrespecting them, and people should not confuse between the two.
Yeah, that's why Hoppa's mad at me. Because I was not only falsifying Rothbard, it made me angry originally, right? I mean, I'm human too, right? I mean, it just made me angry to realize what he was doing. And I really, if I read Rothbard now, I'd see him through the lens of I did the best he could given his cultural background and his understanding of the world and the metaphysics he relied upon. Right, but at the time, it really offended me because I saw what it was doing. And so, yeah, how did you just say it? How did you say it, Francis? You don't want to disrespect. You need to get over your anger and about disrespecting people in the past, unless they were intentionally malicious. Right? It's like being mad at Kant. I'm like, you screwed up everything. Right? See, Brad, Brad, I got him, Brad. It's like, he screwed up everything. But, he didn't really. He made an advance, right? Was he, and if you look at his structure versus Smith and Hume, it's a very analytic approach, right? He basically started that movement. So how do you argue with? Why should I be critical of him? But I should be critical of people not progressing beyond it, right? I'm critical of people reaching these things and thinking they found the freaking end of the freaking knowledge rainbow, when that's old stuff. Or like looking at someone like Heidegger and saying, to me, this is, as an exercise in how to abuse and misuse language to produce an alternate metaphysics, the technical exercise is fascinating, but it's still nonsense, right? And so it's the same thing with Kant. One of the first things I did was I scienced Kant to show how he was almost correct, right? I mean, I wrote this piece on it, which is, I don't know, a couple of thousand words. And it's like, well, he was almost correct. The problem is that almost was a lot wrong, right? Because it misled a lot of people into thinking magic about words the same way Socrates and Plato thought magic about words. Whereas, I mean, I think one of the big things we've gotten out of the analytic movement and the post-analytic movement is the emphasis on human action, on operationalism, which really came about at the same time as Popper when they realized the problem that was emerging in mathematics was turning it into a pseudoscience. And by the way, you can't have these discussions with anybody because almost nobody has the knowledge of all the domains necessary to even participate. I mean, even if you can find somebody that understands, like there's one prof that I'm aware of, and he tries to explain everything that's Kantian realm, and I'm like, well, that's why you're wrong. It's because you're trying to make everything fit the wrong system of measurement. That it was an improvement does not mean it was good, right? I mean, today it's just nonsense. So the problem we face in our discipline all the way. No, Moritz, it's not him. He's not even anywhere near that level. I hope that doesn't show up, does it? If that shows up, I'm dead. I'll have to black that out. Anyway, so these people, one of the problems we've had is, and Martin said this beautiful the other day, is that we're not producing a theory of everything, because that's a theory of the quantum background. We need a theory. The theory of everything we're talking about is the theory of quantum background. We're producing the logic of everything above it.
Brad said
right?
that.
What?
Brad said that.
Brad said that?
Yeah.
That was you, Brad? Okay, he's not going to take credit for it. I thought it was you. I get you guys all confused, despite that you have different hair.
Very different.
Do we
Eric.
think we solved the demarcation thing?
No, I thought Eric was going to say something. No. Okay, so Eric, by the way, Eric, you have to leave at 11:30 apparently.
Yeah.
Right? Because he's an important man with many important things to do and many obligations. So I just want to reinforce that I really enjoyed having you here today, and I hope you continue to participate.
That's fine.
Right? So when you cut out, that's great. So the demarcation problem. Demarcation between what?
The science and non-science.
Right. So I do it as this arc, right? I categorize the spectrum of literatures as human anthropomorphism, right? Or it's actually what's the term for it? Why is this? I'm having another terminological problem. Proprioception. So the embodiment, proprioception. So you have this natural tendency of human beings, which ends up as anthropomorphization, which is obvious because you have to have cooperation. When cooperation is basically projection, right, and reflection. So you get this, and from that you get anthropomorphization. Then you get mythology, which is anthropomorphic. Then you get religious, which is again anthropomorphic. It's how a dictate comes down from the headman or from the parents. Then you get philosophy, which is, wait a minute, we are maybe independent of all that. Let's look at the world as we can understand it with human reason. And then you get empiricism. Well, what does empiricism do? It falsifies human reason. In other words, it takes account for the limits of our senses and reasoning. What does science do? Science is the production of testimony. Now we have to say, not only is it empirical, not only is it rational, but does it survive our falsification, our testing? Then we get into what what we do, which is constructivism, which is, okay, we've discovered the first principles. So now how are in
Recording stopped.
adversarial competition. I don't know what that was.
Happens.
All right. So YouTube, that's on my end or something. Oh, that's the AI.
No problem.
So what's happened is that we've gone through this spectrum of completely internal to completely external. So the demarcation in this arc of those different disciplines, constructivism is what we do, right? Can we construct it from first principles? And then it's probably true. And then can we falsify it against the evidence of the world? Then it's probably not false. Right? And so we have at least we have a incrementally refining theory. So but even though there is more to explore, because there's never an end to language, there's never an end to chemical and molecular recombination, etc. So there's there's no need for life to run out of things to do any more than there is of language to run out of combinations to make, or atoms, molecules, the more combinations to make. So we're into constructionism. Once you're constructionism, now everything is much easier to produce, because now you're just trying to work with the possibilities. So what's demarcation between, I don't do it between science and non-science. I do it by this art. Which degree of precision are you relying on? Because which things are included in each domain and which are excluded. So in philosophy, we don't need to have empiricism and testimony. And this is why German philosophy, or continental philosophy, maintains this interesting balance between a morality of religion and reason and some limited amount of evidence, right? It's up in there. Whereas what we do is like, well, we just produce the truth. From there, anything that isn't bad, isn't false or irreciprocal is good. We don't tell people what good is. What does religion do? You have all these confusing things, so we're going to tell you what good is to create a standard of measurement. But what's the adaptability of religion under that? It's very weak. What's the adaptability of philosophy by changing reason? Well, we've seen that in the West. It's pretty good. What's the adaptability under science? Well, it's pretty convincing. What's the adaptability under computation? It's the least resistant to adaptation because the least considerate of human psychology, biology, and laws. All we're trying to figure out is what's true. What's good is then a matter of philosophy. What did I do, Brad? Sometimes I say these things, they get rolling laughter out of you, and I have no idea what was funny.
It's the issue is that the science doesn't care about your feelings, and your feelings are slowing you down.
Yes.
And it's like all the other languages, logics, and grammars are increasingly ambiguous and account for my feelings more and more and more. The less precise the language is away from the science.
Yeah, so I just describe it as we're increasingly producing commensurability as we go through this curve, right? And then the backward thing is once we have commensurability, now we can choose any specific good. Because the whole point of all this wisdom literature is to prevent harm and irreciprocity, non-cooperation, and the negatives that come with it. But once we have truth, then anything that's true and anything that's not false or irreciprocal is a good. So it's sort of like, and that's one of the reasons we have such a problem, is we're sort of it's like what I say all that happens sometime in the middle there, when we hit the Industrial Revolution, we surpassed human scale of perception. Our information just got way beyond human scale. And so Francis, yes, I don't want to lose my train of thought. We went way beyond human scale, and we didn't realize you have to move from co-organization to falsification, because these people have to agree, and these people from here on only have to not disagree. Does that make sense? I can't figure if I made that point there, but we'll be okay. Francis says I have to hurry the hell up. He didn't say it like that.
It's been 90 minutes and we're on question 5. We have like 10 more to go.
Well, I mean, if we run out of time, we just save them for the next one. I mean,
Very well.
are you telling me to shut the hell up, Francis?
No, I'm,
It's possible.
I'm just doing a
Sure,
time
because it
check.
sounds like you're telling me to shut the hell up.
I think the problem is if the questions accumulate faster than we go.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yes.
that might be the concern.
Because then we start developing a backlog.
Backlog isn't bad. With the biggest problem we'll ever run into is if we don't have anything to answer. All right, so okay, great question. I hope I reframed demarcation as the dimensions that are included or excluded from this hierarchy of grammars as we move from subjective to objective, and we move from trying to coordinate people to trying to prevent conflict and malinvestment.
Last thing I'd like to add is just that the demarcation problem itself is posed from an understanding of the world that isn't actually up to task. And
Yes.
so, yeah.
Well, I said that falsifiability is sufficient for demarcation because, well, you don't know it's true, but it's testable now, so it's scientific claim in that sense.
I separate it from, are you trying to conflate the good and the true? If you're trying, so my view is that the truth can tell you what's true, but philosophies plural can determine what's good within the truth. And so all we care about is philosophies that aren't false and irreciprocal. And so the demarcation is between choice, philosophy, the satisfaction of choice, right? Organized people in the positive, and law in organizing people, prohibiting people from interrupting with organization in the false, and science, which is just neutral decision making.
It's just a distinction between is and ought. It's ironic that our use of is prohibits use of is.
All right, are we ready for the next question?